It almost feels like there was one world before ChatGPT and a very different world after ChatGPT. The kind of stories that are emerging from around the world about ChatGPT and generative AI and the uses to which these are being put to, it looks like we are the beginning of a revolution that will transform just about everything around us. At the root of one form of generative AI is what is called a large language model. Large language models enable businesses to automate language-related tasks. So what are the opportunities that this brings? Can we build large language models for Indian language content? What are the opportunities and challenges in this? That's what we will discuss today. So welcome to this Times Techies webinar. I'm Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Akhil George. The two of us will moderate the discussion. And we have four very seasoned professionals on our panel. We have with us Abhishek Singh. Mr. Singh is President and CEO of the National E-Governance Division. He's MD and CEO of Digital India Corporation and CEO of Karmayogi Bharat. Mr. Singh is a career civil servant with 27 years of experience of governance and policy formulation. He specializes in the use of technology for improving governance. In his roles at NeGD and Digital India Corporation, he leads major Digital India initiatives, including projects in the field of AI and emerging technologies. As CEO of Karmayogi Bharat, he has been tasked with building a tech platform for capacity building of all civil servants. Mr. Singh also happens to be an engineer. He did mechanical engineering from IIT Kanpur. Welcome, Mr. Singh. We have with us Srikanth Velamakanni. Srikanth has been on our platform before. Srikanth is the co-founder, group CEO, and executive vice chairman of Fractal, one of the leading players in artificial intelligence and digital transformation. Since Srikanth co-founded Fractal in 2000, the company has raised more than $300 million from private equity investors and has empowered more than 100 Fortune 500 companies with its AI, data, and analytics-driven business strategies. Under his leadership, Fractal has developed several product lines within the company, including Cuddle.ai, Eugenie.ai, and Cure.ai. Prior to co-founding Fractal, Srikanth was an investment banker. Welcome, Srikanth.
We also have Monish Darda with us. Monish too has been on this platform before. Monish is co-founder and CTO of Icertis, another globally successful product venture. Monish has overseen development of Icertis' cloud-based contract management platform, a platform that is used by companies like Airbus, Daimler, Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, and Sanofi to manage 7.5 million contracts worth more than $1 trillion. Monish has also led successful deployments of cutting-edge AI and blockchain technologies for Icertis. Prior to Icertis, Monish led a string of successful ventures, including the launch of Blade Logic's India R&D. Welcome, Monish.
Thank you.
And we also have Abhinav Aggarwal. Abhinav is co-founder and CEO of Fluid AI. Fluid AI builds AI-powered bots, including voice bots, and it has an AI-driven data analytics platform. The company's clients include the likes of Bank of America, Barclays, Capgemini, Vodafone, Toyota, Intel, Rolls-Royce, and Daimler Mercedes. Abhinav dropped out of the MBA program at ISB Hyderabad to found Fluid AI. He's a chartered accountant, but he's always had a passion for coding and is a self-taught coder. He began this journey when he emerged as one of the winners of the world's biggest 24-hour coding competition, the TechCrunch Disrupt Hackathon, which happened in New York in 2012. Welcome, Abhinav.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So now those who are viewing this can send in questions through the Facebook comment box. Sujit and I will put them to Mr. Singh, Srikanth, Monish, and Abhinav. So why don't we start? Srikanth, let me start with you. Maybe you can tell us what a large language model is. I'm sure our viewers would love to know.
Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, thank you for that prompt, I should say. And my large language model is going to now give you the answer. The background to large language models is essentially the idea of what is self-supervised learning. If you go back 50 years, AI started in 1956. The term AI was coined in 1956 in a summer project at Dartmouth. And even 50 years later, most of the AI was about creating rules and exceptions to the rules and so on, which we now call as the good old-fashioned AI. But around 2010 onwards, we saw the rise of deep learning as a technique to do AI. And these were, and generally AI techniques and analytics techniques can be classified into supervised, unsupervised, or reinforcement learning. Supervised, you give examples. Okay, here are the 10 pictures of cats, here are the 10 pictures of dogs, and here are the 10 pictures of not dog, not cat. And that is supervised. Unsupervised is when you give a large amounts of information or data and say, find something interesting. Can you group them into in similar categories? So there is no example, there's no labels, but you learn from just data. And reinforcement learning is when you do something and you get some feedback. So you start playing a game and you get a little score, or your whatever, roll dice, or you get some feedback, you learn from the experience and get better. That's reinforcement learning. So what happened with large language models is a new form of learning called semi-supervised learning, which is about you give it a large amounts of text, let's say a string, let's say one paragraph, right? It takes the first few words of the paragraph and tries to predict the next word in the paragraph. And once it knows what that is, it tries to predict the next word. And in doing so, it tries to understand if a sequence of words are somewhere, then the following is what is the most logical next step in that. So think of it as glorified auto-completion. But it appears like when you throw in incredible amounts of text, all the knowledge of the world, it seems to be able to extract this knowledge. It's mysterious. We still don't know how it does it, but it now has this idea of saying, now you can tell it, hey, can you take the Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, and can you write it in the style of Ramdhari Singh Dinkar in Hindi? It will do it. Nobody taught it Hindi, nobody taught it Bengali, nobody taught it Telugu or English for that matter, but somehow it seems to understand it. These large language models are very largely parameterized, which means that they have, in GPT-3 famously has 175 billion parameters. So it's a very large, think of it as 175 billion knobs that you can tweak. If you're the pilot of a plane, you have that many knobs to tweak and get the flight to move in the right way. That's the kind of power of these models. They have incredible amounts of data. So 570 gigabytes of data is what GPT-3 was trained on, which is 30 times the size of Wikipedia. And from a compute standpoint, they throw in enormous amounts of computational resources, something like 285,000 CPU cores and 10,000 GPUs to train this model. So we've thrown in a large amounts of data, build an incredible amount of compute, and bring this new way of solving the problem, which is semi-supervised learning. It produced this kind of magic, which is called ChatGPT. Now it is so flexible that you ask a question, it takes the question and produces the answer. So that's the little bit of a primer on LLMs.
Okay, I remember you saying, if it is I love, then it figures out because of all the training that the next word has to be you, or most likely you or something. I remember you saying something like that once.
Exactly. So it does that auto-completion type of thing, but it can go all the way to writing a whole book or a whole paragraph or a whole story. And that is what is very fascinating, that it is able to do that in a flexible way.
Okay. Mr. Singh, what you are using these kind of models already in India in your initiatives? What?
You see, as Srikanth said, AI has been around for some time, and there are huge applications of large language models in the way we deliver public services, that we even allow people to talk to each other. Like in India, a very important challenge people face is we are a diverse country with 22 official languages. So whenever we enable public services, when we talk of inclusion, we always feel that not only services should be available to everyone who doesn't have a device or doesn't have connectivity in a assisted access mode, but more importantly, services have to be available, information and services have to be available all Indian languages. And going ahead, given the potential of technology is that, can we also use such models to enable voice-enabled services? Because in India, very often we say that 875 billion people or more are connected to the internet, but around 500 million people are not yet. So in order to bring them onto e-services, in order to connect them, in order to ensure digital inclusion, we will need to enable services through voice and through all languages. So therein the value comes in of language models, wherein we can train the tools to communicate with people in their own languages. So we are implementing a project called Bhashini, in which we are crowdsourcing large amount of data sets. So the biggest limiting point is not having data sets in all Indian languages sufficiently large numbers. So we are crowdsourcing through the Bhasha Dan initiative, which calls for Suno India, Dekho India, Likho India, Padho India. in which we tell people to contribute to data sets in their own language. And these data sets are then subjected to large language models to build in tool sets for translation, for transliteration, speech to speech, speech to text, text to speech, and text to text. And these models are then published on our API Setu platform so that anyone wanting to use these tools can also do that. And as part of that initiative, and when ChatGPT became like the buzzword last November, December, then our teams who were working on the Bhashini project, they worked on an interface wherein they integrated the Bhashini APIs with WhatsApp APIs and ChatGPT APIs, and then tried to build up a tool called Jugalbandi, which we are testing on right now, wherein you can actually go and make a query on a WhatsApp voice note. And then, like, so for example, one example that we've been testing is like somebody goes and says that कि मैं उत्तर प्रदेश में रहता हूँ, मैं किसान हूँ, मेरी आय 10,000 रुपए, मुझे सरकार से क्या मिल सकता है? And then this text, this voice input is changed into text, and this text is fed into the LLM. And then the reply comes in कि सरकार आपको प्रधानमंत्री किसान योजना, प्रधानमंत्री उज्ज्वला योजना, whatever schemes which are there, it gives you that information. And then the person can think of asking for more details. And then it retains the context while saying that. He can ask, where do I go to a common service center or to a website, a URL, what documents he will require. And this entire chain goes on. So that kind of training is done. And the value of it will be like, since I'm getting a voice input and voice output, tomorrow I can offer this service on a feature phone with a toll-free number, wherein even those who don't have a smartphone, who don't have WhatsApp, who don't have connectivity, who don't have internet, they also can access services in this manner. The power of such LLM technology is huge, but the bottlenecks that we have currently, as Srikanth also mentioned, is how do we ensure that we have sufficient number of data sets which are available in all languages? How do we ensure that we have sufficient amount of compute that is available to process these data sets and come out with the responses? So yes, the Bhashini project is working in this direction, and hopefully with the help of our startups, our researchers, we'll be able to make some similar products which will be of more use to the common man.
A lot more to ask you there, Mr. Singh. But before that, let me bring in Monish. Before this started, we were discussing for you. You were already working on generative AI even before ChatGPT and all came out. And you said you are in the contract management space where there's a lot of legalese and all that, and difficult to understand contracts and stuff. And generative AI has been extremely useful there. Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very interesting for us as contract lifecycle management, right? What we call contract intelligence stems from the fact that our holy grail is to look at a contract, make sure we understand the intent of that contract, and then make sure that large companies like Microsoft, large companies like Johnson & Johnson and Sanofi can actually take those contracts, make sense out of the contracts, and make sure that the intent of the contract is fully realized in the real world. Right? Why do you contract? Why do you actually agree to something between two parties is actually very essential when it comes to business. For example, if you think about every dollar that goes inside the company, whether somebody pays you or you pay somebody, each and every dollar or rupee going in and out of the company has a contract behind it. No transaction in a company happens without a contract, which means if you can actually make sure that the intent is fully realized, then you can actually optimize your business outcomes. And that's why our vision is actually to transform the foundation of commerce, because that's the foundation of commerce. Now you think about, figuring out what is written in the contract, even lawyers sometimes, right? It's very hard. It's complex. It's legalese. It's not just legal. It's business interfacing with legal. It's compliance interfacing with legal. It's risk management. It's all of these parameters that make up a business that go into the contract that makes it very hard to understand. And large language models in general, starting with basic natural language processing, which allowed us to do a lot of work before the large language models became practical, have been the cornerstone of a lot of our AI work in the last few years. Now, if you think about large language models, we still use BERT, which was one of the transformer models that came in out of Google. And there is something called legal BERT, which is now a very specific model that is trained on legal contracts. And we have the largest repository of curated contracts on the planet. Nobody has as many contracts that are curated in the enterprise than we do at Icertis. So we can actually take that data and we can use that to make some interesting super trained or domain specific, as they are called, models that allow us to make sense out of contracts. And that's what we've been working on for a while. What LLMs did, especially ChatGPT, and remember the chat is only to tell you that it is trained more on human conversations, not just the data. But you had DALL-E before in OpenAI, which I've been using for like 1.5 years. And DALL-E actually from a text prompt can generate an image. So there have been the transformer models kind of available at a large scale for a while. It's only when ChatGPT was released that it actually got to 100 million users in under a month, right? So that's the excitement of this technology, that you actually go, it's a step change in how AI is perceived, how AI is used, how AI actually triggers use cases going forward. And that's incredibly useful to us as well as a contract lifecycle management company.
So you can feed in an entire complex contract into the system and it summarizes the essence of it for somebody who can't understand all of that legalese, is it?
Yes, and that's just one use case. It can summarize, it can translate. I can translate from English to Hindi. It's one of the best translation tools available today, if you think about it that way, right? You have had translation services available across Amazon, Google, Microsoft before, but the LLMs make a transformational difference in the quality of translation. You can do summarization, you can do intent, you can do sentiment, you can do categorization, you can do creation. You can say, hey, why don't you create a clause for me so that I have this business outcome? And it will actually then start creating the clause for you. So there is generation, which is, from the OpenAI perspective, it's called the completion API. So if you use the completion API, you can do a variety of things on the contract side. Then, very interestingly, this is just the beginning, and AI has always been this problem. You can get some insights, but unless you have an action to take on the insights, usually in the real world, it's not useful. Now, because we have the data, because we have the workflow, we can actually convert this insight, whatever you're doing, into actually an action. You can do something with your insight. You can do something with your generation. You can do something with your translation. You can do something with your intent. I think that makes a huge difference.
Okay. Even the translation point was interesting. Yeah, Google and Microsoft and all have been working on this for so long. I was wondering why their translations are not so good. Now you're saying with LLMs, it changes a lot. Okay, Abhinav, give us an idea. I mean, what does Fluid AI do? What kind of work have you been doing in this space?
Absolutely, Sujit. So what we're enabling is organizations at scale to ingest all their data. So whatever data that they have. So think about it this way, right? If you interact with the ChatGPT or Google's Bard, it's like a very intelligent knowledge worker at your disposal, but it doesn't know anything about your organization, right? Its internal documents, its internal processes, its internal systems. That's only an employee has that knowledge. Now, imagine if you built almost a co-pilot for each employee within your organization, right? So what we do is we allow an enterprise to take all the data, put it into a large language model, like a GPT model, and then expose it to all their employees. So suddenly you have a co-pilot that's helping a support person to do better support when he's on a call and in a tough situation, doesn't know what to do. He's untrained, he's less trained. You have a salesperson and he needs to figure out how to kind of pitch the product, or he's new in the organization, wants to understand how a particular product works. He doesn't need to now go to people. He has everyone in the organization will have this one AI assistant, which will help them out in any ways, right? So support, sales are popular use cases, but there are use cases across even operations, general management, leadership across that they can use this, and that's what at Fluid AI we're kind of enabling for a lot of these organizations.
And voice and all, very conversational, is it? How's it working?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because these LLMs now, they're becoming multimodal. So that just means that currently, if you see, the most popular format is text, but the next generation with GPT-4, as well as the other large language models out there, a lot of them are becoming multimodal, which means they can take in text, but they can also take in image, they can take in voice, and all in one model. So it's almost like you've recreated a human. You can talk to it, you can send it text, you can send it an image, visual, you can send it a visual. So now it's like the LLM has eyes and ears, along with everything else that it has.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so we've discussed how to create these LLMs. Srikanth mentioned the kind of computing power you need. But Monish has mentioned that lawyers are going to be redundant in the future from.
No, I didn't.
I'm impugning that. Okay, but how do you actually create these LLMs? You need that data, right? So suppose an Indian language, how difficult is it to get all that data? Do you have to crawl the web? What's that process like? Maybe, so I don't know who wants to take this.
Srikanth, go ahead. Can we create synthetic data in these kind of cases?
Yeah, so I think firstly, for example, in India, only 8.3% Indians actually can speak English. So even as we are currently having this conversation, 90% of India is not going to be able to access it in a way that they feel like they're comfortably able to understand and interpret and use it. So what if we could, the same Facebook Live event was actually happening in multiple languages, where depending on my language, I just plug in Marathi and my lip movement to my body language to what I say, everything is real time converted into that language that we want. It's actually possible. It's not very far off. There are some technical challenges, especially in rendering real time video, etc. But we are just a couple of steps away from that situation. So now coming to India, I feel like we have such a rich literary tradition in different parts of India, every language. I mean, I come from the state of Andhra Pradesh, and back during my undergrad days, I was trying to translate one little short story, which is a very famous short story written by a Telugu literary genius called Chaganti Somayajulu. He is called Chaso in Telugu. So I was and it took me a full 2 weeks of a lot of hard work because my Telugu is not very good. So reading it and then translating it to English was just one of the hard problems. It's something that right now ChatGPT doesn't do that because it doesn't have access to that document. That story is not there. In its corpus of training, it doesn't know what the story is, so it doesn't know how to translate it. But soon enough, that will happen. So when you think of India, the chances of bringing India's rich literary tradition to all of the world and all of India, and to make India more open and connected, and even the whole world more open and connected, is very big and very real. So that is the opportunity. And the challenges there are data sets. But I would submit to you that most often we think of data as a more unsurmountable challenge than it really is. Because even literally as we are conversing, data is getting generated. And every conversation between two people is potentially data, as long as it is collected in the right way, etc. There's no dearth of data. By the way, the first language models that were constructed were actually based on Canadian Parliament. Because Canadian Parliament used to record every conversation in both French and English. So first corpus was, this is French, this is English, and they are the same, except that we need a translation layer between them. And that's how the first language models were constructed. So there is a rich tradition of documentation across the country. All we need is to bring them together. So as with Abhishek Singh ji, and we actually ran a project, NASSCOM ran a project last year on open government data. Government has access to enormous data sources. You'll be surprised at how much data our government already has, all kinds of information. Each department, each ministry has 100,000 plus databases. 100,000 databases. Let me say that again. It's shocking to you. That kind of data sets are there. If we expose those data sets and then harness those data sets, and that is, by the way, becoming easier than ever before, we already have the data. So we may not even need to generate synthetic data. Though, Sujit, I think, yes, synthetic data is also a real possibility. People are generating synthetic data in a number of training instances, and it's actually doing a really good job. So it's possible, but I think we already have an enormous corpus of data in the country.
Yeah, I would, if you don't mind, Sujit, I think I would challenge a little bit of that in terms of synthetic data, because I think the problem is that hallucinations actually happen. The most kind of common reason for hallucinations is that the data is not reliable, that the data that went into the training of the model is not reliable. Synthetic data, by definition, cannot be reliable in the sense that it could be reliable in terms of the value of the data. If you say, what is the age of a particular person who lives here, or the average age. That number might be accurate, but because you're generating, it may not be factual. And that means synthetic data actually has no place in the current kind of real world of the transformer models, the large language models. I think what you need to focus on, as Srikanth rightly said, is the amount of data that you can expose to these models so that they can learn. I think the problem is, if you think about India, the most populous country in the world now, according to some recent news stories, you think about India as a corpus of internet users, we probably generate the most amount of data in the world by country. We probably do, right? That has already gone into the large language models, most likely. There's a Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of that is, grist for the mill for all of these trainings. So all that data in Hindi, English, Telugu, all the regional languages already gone in. Today, if I go to ChatGPT, especially GPT-4, which is actually very interesting, and I say, hey, give me the SAR of the Bhagavad Gita in Hindi, it will actually give me a very good, dependable answer to that. It will convert that. I can say, hey, give me the shlokas. Give me in Adhyay 17, what is happening in number 5. It'll give me in Devanagari script, not even in English today, right? So that data is already there. Now what you're looking at is the data sets that are kind of not accessible to everybody, right? That is the domain-specific large language model. I think that's the focus that will be very interesting for us going forward. You unlock those data sets. I think because we deal with so many large enterprises at an enterprise level, we know the problem of how difficult it is to even take a simple data set and make it available. First of all, there's people. They object. People hate sharing data, right? Then there is technology. There are systems that are probably 30 years old that are actually holding these data sets. Now you want to kind of make sure that they come out. Then you have reliability, because some of these data sets will also have garbage that is accumulated over decades. Now you have to clean them at some point, though LLMs make it a little bit easier. So sorry, I took a long time, but I think it's a very important point to know that synthetic data is not the solution. It's actually the real data that's created by humans, that is not necessarily curated, but created by humans, which is also responsibly used in the training of a large language model by making sure that you filter out the biases that are inherent in some of these systems that will make us successful.
Okay, so real data is what's important. So Abhishek, what real data, you said data has been a problem. What about in Hindi, for instance? Is there enough data there at least?
Just to add to what Srikanth and Monish were saying, while I agree with Monish was saying that there's a large amount of data that's available, but compared to the amount of data that's available in, say, English, with regard to the amount of data that's available in Indian languages, we are almost near nothing. Because
really?
If a very
that
simple,
bad, huh?
Yes, because a simple example, like if you look at like, for example, Wikipedia pages, the number of Wikipedia pages in English would probably run into a few millions, hundreds of millions or more. If you look at the number of Wikipedia pages in Hindi, it's, I think, of the order of 200,000 or something. But if I go down to a language like Bengali or Tamil or Telugu or Malayalam, the number of Wikipedia pages will be 10,000 or 15,000. And for the lower languages, like, for example, Sindhi or Dogri or Bodo, because our country is very diverse, and if you have to access even the 22 official languages, we need to have a large amount of content, language, text, data available in all these languages. Otherwise, any LLM will be not as accurate as it should be. Then the other issue in India, of course, is that even a language like Hindi, the way it is spoken in various parts of Hindi, like Hindi of Madhya Pradesh and Hindi of UP, will be totally different to Hindi of Bihar or Delhi. So there also we need to, when we are building a large language model, we have to train it in every form in which people in India could speak. Then only it will be able to comprehend it, understand it, give it back. So with this objective, the Bhashadan project is launched. So using this platform, I would like to appeal to those who are tuned in to do go to Bhashadan and try to contribute to datasets in your own languages, whether it's text or speech or written stuff. You can do that, and you can join this movement of making our datasets richer, and that will make the Bhashini project more robust, more accurate. The other thing that we are doing
Bhashadan, what do you have to do? You can record your voice, is it?
See, what it does is that bhashadan.gov.in, And there are several options to contribute to data sets. One is Padho India. Like there will be something that will be written, a text in your language. You have to read it out and it will record. Or it will be Dekho India, in which some object or something will be there. You have to see it and try to name it in the language of your choice. And Likho India will be some text translation will be there and you have to correct it if it is wrong in your own language. Or Dekho India, in which you see and do the Padho, Dekho, Likho, Siko. So those options are there on Bhashadan, which is building data sets. While it is picking up, it was launched by the Prime Minister last year in July, but we need more and more data sets in all languages so that this becomes better. And whatever is contributed is made available to everyone. It's not that only the government institutions or government entities will be using it. It will be a public good, which will be these APIs that are being developed, these translation models are published on api-setu.gov.in. So any entity, any Indian entity who wants to build up a solution on top of it can use them and do that. So that's one. Second thing that we are doing is, of course, we are leveraging a lot of content from Doordarshan and All India Radio, because they do produce a lot of content in all Indian languages. We are trying to get them from Prasar Bharati, trying to populate it in the large language models that Bhashini is building, and using it also for authentic translations and building these tools. The other component about which Srikanth mentioned is that, yes, it's true that government produces a large amount of data in every domain, whether it's agriculture, whether it's healthcare. The amount of data sets that we have is huge. So we have a national data sharing and accessibility policy, which was notified in 2012. And now we are coming with the national data governance framework, the draft of which has already gone through public consultations. And I'm thankful to Srikanth and the whole NASSCOM team for contributing to development of that whole framework. And what it will do is that it will ensure the setting up of the India Datasets program and India Datasets platform, wherein more than 500,000 datasets, which are already available on data.gov.in, will be made available in a format where it will be indexed, it will be cleaned up, it will be confirmed to the data standards and metadata standards, it will come up with privacy preservation and anonymization tools, and it will allow sharing of non-personal data in a very transparent framework, wherein all researchers, all startups who want to use that data sets can use it and build solutions. For example, very simple data set like the speed breakers in a city, or the location of traffic lights, or the timing that's assigned to a traffic light in a city. This data is available with us. But this data can be very critical for somebody who is building up a 10-minute delivery system. Yeah. So once you make these data sets available, which are non-personal, then it can lead to a lot of innovation, and our people like Abhinav and all will think of some things which government can never think of. But if our role is only to ensure that data sets are available, the APIs are made available, and we allow the innovation and creativity of our entrepreneurs run wild. So that's what I would like to add on this.
Okay, Mr. Singh,
can I?
Yeah, please go.
Abhinav wanted to say something. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I want to first gently push Monish back a little bit on his low regard for synthetic data, because I used to belong to the same camp maybe 6 months or 9 months back, but I think things have changed a lot on synthetic data. They're actually very helpful. Even you may have heard of the news that Google was trying to use ChatGPT output as a training mechanism a few weeks back.
Even OpenAI is doing that as well.
So because there's a human reinforcement learning from human feedback is now common. So if you know which are the good ones with good answers, so synthetic data validated by human beings is useful. Synthetic data as a validation mechanism is useful. Synthetic data as a training mechanism with real data as a validation is useful. There are multiple uses for synthetic data. I mean, again, we could get into technical details here, but I think let's not underestimate the value of synthetic data. And one point I wanted to mention on what Abhishek said about Indian data being smaller. Yes, it is true. Hindi, any language, we have much smaller data sets than, let's say, English, because it's so much more common. The only thing I will say is that we don't need that much data, because large language models are building this generic understanding. It could be in any language. All we need to do is to tune that for specific languages. So in that sense, the heavy lifting has already been done. Now we don't need that much more data to train them in multiple languages. By default, they've already learned some of these languages on their own. Now we have to give them a little bit more data so that they're even better. But it is totally possible, and we don't have to have the same heavy burden that English has had to play in doing this. So I think there is hope there. That's what I wanted to add.
I think there's also, Yes, absolutely. But I think that there's a very finer distinction there as well, that you need facts also. And I think Mr. Singh also gave that example, right? If you have traffic lights and their locations and so on, if it's not there, then you have to kind of feed that, which means you have to, kind of complement the understanding of the language. So separate the understanding of the language from what you can do with the understanding. And I think to do anything with the understanding, you need the data.
But facts don't have to be in Hindi or Telugu. Facts are in any language is okay, right? Facts are independent of language.
Not necessarily.
That is the reason why we don't.
Not necessarily.
No, but
like your example of
facts just translating into any languages is not synthetic data. So synthetic data would mean maybe a simulation data or something. Like, how do you do that? So yes, the synthetic data thing is growing up, but then that also brings to another challenge of this entire generative AI, of deep fakes, and how things can be created which are not real. So I think that would require a much longer discussion on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Just to rebase a bit, and I think everyone's making some very interesting points, right? When you build a large language model, let's say in Hindi, for example, you need two things, right? You need a great digital Hindi content, right? So literally Hindi script written out in a digital readable format that can be fed to a model at scale, which, like Abhishek pointed out, in languages like Telugu and all, is much smaller. Because if you take voice data and all, you still need it for the large language model, you still need it in text format. That's one layer, right? That builds your base foundational model. On top of that, you need, like Srikanth had mentioned a little earlier, the concept of reinforcement learning. That's what makes it the capability for it to chat back and forth, right? So that's just feedback from humans that understand that language, that, hey, this was a good answer, this was a bad answer, and rate those answers at scale. Right. So I think if you can solve, right now India is at the stage where we're still solving the first part of the problem, right? Great digital content at scale for those languages. Synthetic data could be a great way of going about it. Even translation can be a very interesting approach to solving that, right? If you take 1 million Wikipedia pages, you translate them from English to Hindi, the challenge is that translation itself needs a large language model to do it at high quality, right? So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation where you're like, I need a great translation model whose foundation is also somewhere a slightly different, like a sequence to sequence version of a large language model. So not exactly the same, but very similar, like the base foundation. So I think, yes, synthetic data, I agree kind of with Srikanth that it could be an interesting approach to take. Translation could be an interesting approach. And as the areas kind of keep improving, you'll kind of start being able to leverage more and more of it. But yeah, those are the two parameters that need to be solved.
Do you need Indian data
one idea for Abhishek? I think this Bhashadan is such a brilliant idea. Maybe at the next level, we could even use it for human reinforcement learning with human feedback. That could be the mechanism to do that as soon as we start getting some output. So I think it would be quite game changing for our country if we could also, given our population, and if you could popularize this, it could be quite interesting.
I think it's crowdsourcing. It's perfect. That's what you need here, right? That's what, the way Abhishek, described this is all crowdsourcing. You get something, you translate it, you say, describe the object, you say, in your language, preferred language, what the object is. It's a perfect area. It has to be at a national level. We just have to know about it. And I, for one, I'm going to make sure that in Icertis, we start, socializing this and, encouraging people to do this.
Oh, that will be great. That will be great. Because in fact, we have been trying to get folk singers and all to contribute there, because there's so much of diversity and so much of way people speak and express things. And the more such data sets come, the models will become as good.
Yeah, we should get Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, Mr. Tendulkar to do this, your ambassador.
We have Bollywood and Tollywood cinema, right? We've got, I think there are 220 Telugu movies produced every year, and I think similar 200 Tamil movies getting produced every year, very high quality ones. We can use them too.
Maybe
trust me, it is all going in the LLMs.
It will help us reach these celebrities and brand ambassadors.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But Abhishek, you can use the movies things that Srikanth is talking about. You can use those movie content as well, right?
Yes, that is being done. Like we need, of course, authorized content. So that's why all the content that's there with the public sector broadcaster, and very often in the smaller languages, Doordarshan and All India Radio have much better content. So that is being used, because the Bollywood and Tollywood will address Hindi and Bengali and Tamil and Telugu maybe. But to go to a Bodo or to go to a Santhali or to go to a Mizo, we'll need to do that.
And you're more focused
Actually,
on
I saw that
voice than text, is it?
Both voice and text, because we also realize that the remaining 500 million people in India who are not connected to the internet, they may need a voice as a medium. And just like we talk to Alexas and Siris, and the models that we have done on Umang, like, hey Umang, driving license kaise milega, ya Manrega card kaise milega, and then people are able to ask their queries and get their replies. So that's where the real power will lie.
So in fact, that's already like I think it was Abhinav who was saying this about multimodal models, right? Which is it can take input in any language or any form, picture, video, voice, text, etc. And soon it will also produce in any form that you want. So it will be anything to anything will happen with the layer of intelligence in between. So that is, it's not very far. It's in fact already being prototyped and demoed, etc. It's not been launched publicly, but many services are coming up. So we'll see this, the difference between text, video, movie, all of that is going to
disappear. Oh, very interesting. Abhinav, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, India is actually a very interesting position because obviously we are building our LLMs a little later than everyone else, right, in our languages. One of the mistakes that, or not mistakes, they had to do it that way, was that the data that they crawled, not a lot of it is with consent. And there are folks like, what ChatGPT crawled, etc. There are questions being raised on, what was under common use license, right? They scraped whole of Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow's licenses says that you can't just use my data to train. And they're kind of settling it outside legally in the market. So India's kind of now in this smart position, right? Because we've understood that, okay, when you're taking data at scale, you need to be a little careful of what you're scraping, what you're allowed to scrape, and how to kind of handle that. And things like Bhashni, where people are actually voluntarily kind of submitting their samples, is phenomenal, right? Because you are taking consent and then you are using people's data for building the LLM. So that could actually somewhere help us out in the future, where our data that we are training the LLMs on is very well marked out, segregated, what is under what license, puts us in a better position for the future than some of these guys who will have to also start figuring these things out.
No, it's incredibly important because I think every country in the world is starting to think about AI regulation. The EU is actually one of the most advanced in there. I'm, part of the vote that is happening in the EU next month. I'm part of the discussion on day one with a regulator who helped frame the GDPR. And it's very interesting. That kind of conversation is something that is very interesting. It will affect all of us. It will affect the solutions, it affects the data, it affects how AI is used in different use cases. And in India as well, I think we will end up eventually having a strong AI regulation in terms of, how this technology can be used. It's that powerful. It's like nuclear energy, right? It has to be regulated, it has to be controlled, but it also has to do public good. And it's it's some of the most interesting kind of things that has happened in the last 50 years or so.
Yeah, very true.
Abhinav, what you were saying before was fascinating, that translations might be a way to solve the language problem, right? If you can just translate Hindi, all English articles to Hindi, doesn't that solve the data problem in one instance?
Not really.
But no, it doesn't.
It does actually. So there's another type of model. It's called a sequence to sequence model. They're slightly easier to train. They're not as complex as a sophisticated large language model with chat capabilities like a ChatGPT, right? Incredibly complex to create. In fact, a Google Translate is based on a sequence to sequence model. The only challenge is a sequence to sequence model needs almost like a lot of reference data. Like, hey, this is in English, this is in Hindi. The exact conversion, whereas a GPT model can be just like, hey, here's like thousands of paras of text, now figure it out.
Yeah, I think the supervised model that Srikanth mentioned, different types of model, you need supervision, and so translation doesn't again work. Again, don't take me verbally, and Srikanth corrected me. It's not that synthetic data is completely useless. Very little is usable in the training, right? The same thing like that. Translation, very little is usable. I think the gold mine there is really, the real data that humans have produced. And I'll give you a simple example. If you tell ChatGPT to tell you a story or write a poem in English, and if you tell ChatGPT to write a poem or a story in Hindi, you'll see that the quality is very different. The perceived quality of how we think good Hindi and good Hindi poems and good Hindi stories should come up, and how we think about how good English stories and how good English poems should look like, you'll see a quality difference there. The quality difference is because it does not have all this content to be trained on, right? And it's real data. It cannot be translated content. Otherwise, you would actually do good poems in Hindi, which are actually English poems or styles.
Yeah, but
I'll just let me
take
connect
that,
with
you can still take the content, even if
You can.
translation, it solves that entire problem of saying that, hey, we don't have a lot of general knowledge content, factual content, like Wikipedia level content, that translation might not give you that style of language, that beauty of like.
That is already Abhinav.
Yeah, I think I'll just
solve the core part of the problem actually.
Maybe I'll connect with what Monish, Abhinav, and Akhil, you are all saying. With translation plus feedback will solve it completely. Let's say it translates and maybe it's not good. It's got 80% accuracy, right? 80% accuracy is good for human consumption, but it's not good enough for something. The 20% can be done by figuring out, giving human feedback. So like we have the Bhashadan. What if we can say, here's some translation that we have produced and keep correcting and give it a rating of 1 to 5, right? It's very good 5 and not very bad 1. And eventually we'll have a very good data set. So there are ways in which you can combine some relatively lower quality models with human feedback and get very high quality, and that becomes a training data set to create.
I agree, Srikanth. We can do all of that, assuming we don't have that data at all.
That's where the challenge is. Like while translation can solve part of the problem, but the ability to translate depends on the quality of data sets you have. So if you don't have sufficient number of data sets, then a translation tool also will be as accurate as they can be. Like today, Hindi to Bengali is like almost 90 to 95% accurate. But when I do a Hindi to Mizo or Hindi to, say, Santhali, the accuracy goes down to almost 50 to 60%. And the reason for that is there are not sufficient number of data sets available in Mizo or Santhali. So that's where the thing
Abhishek, is. So what Srikanth is saying is you can translate and then you can correct.
Correct, yes. But then you have to have people who can correct. When the volumes are high, the correction becomes a challenge. Of course, on Bhashadan, you can do that. Bhashadan, you not only contribute data sets, but you can also, if you're a volunteer and if you want to do that, you can do a lot of corrections also, wherein you see that if this translation is accurate or not, and you rate it as Srikanth was mentioning. So, of course, as mentioned, it's going to be a huge exercise, but our size and magnitude and crowdsourcing, if it works, then I'm sure we'll be able to go ahead and do it.
Absolutely. And Abhishek, I think I would say that, given that English has done the heavy lifting, now we go to the less frequent languages, less spoken languages, and the data sizes are smaller. And then we keep going down, right? If you try to solve Mizo today, it may be harder. But if you try to solve in Telugu or Hindi or Bengali today, we can solve it. And then we add, because now we have trained it a little bit further, now Mizo becomes a little easier. So it's the sequence at which we progress might be useful here.
Yes, and yeah, and that's the way we are trying to do. But yes, in order to ensure that we have such models in all languages, will require a lot more effort than we are at right now. But of course, I don't know, time is not there. But while we are discussing the power of this, but the challenges that we are facing with regard to number of people who might lose jobs or might face challenges, and especially we have talked about translation and all, but the power of ChatGPT, even in doing coding, is immense. In fact, the efficiency of many of our coders have gone up because they have started using shorter modules and asking it to write in Python and all that has huge ramifications for our IT industry, and wherein, like, if one coder is able to do the job of 3, then what does it mean as we go ahead and
so
do
what's your suggestion, Abhishek? What's your suggestion?
See, we need to really rethink like what all we can do, because it will require, while on one set we'll see some jobs getting extinct or not required. In fact, one startup founder told me that he got rid of 5 content writers because he doesn't need them. ChatGPT can do it for him. So we'll have to think of reorienting them, reskilling them, upskilling them. Think of data annotation will be something that will require a lot, because any AI model that has to rely on such technologies will require a lot of data. For example, a TB diagnostic tool will require tagging X-ray images to the diagnosis the doctor has done. So data annotation becomes a very important kind of work. So if we can think of training people in doing that, we'll have to think of people taking up the new jobs that will emerge, but that would require strategies for upskilling, reskilling, and reorienting. And if we don't do that, we are headed for a big challenge in the days to come.
Yeah, Srikanth, you agree with that?
Coincidentally, earlier this week, I did a session with a whole host of institutional investors, funds that invest in Indian stock markets, a bunch of them. And this is the biggest question on their minds is, what happens to the Indian tech industry? What are the positives? What are the negatives? There are some negatives. There are some positives. There's no doubt that coding is becoming much more easy now. If you look at, writing code, debugging code, then maintenance, if you look at test cases, testing code, etc. Right? For example, testing has become, generating test cases. ChatGPT does a better job than most human beings, and you don't need testers. People with careers in testing per se will have to think somewhat differently, and maybe people who write code can also write the test not with ChatGPT. Similarly, debugging. ChatGPT does a fantastic job of debugging code and gives you, okay, what are the various problems in that? Writing code, anyway, people have been copy pasting from Stack Overflow for years. So now they're going to use ChatGPT to do that. So everywhere you see progress, and especially in testing, I think, especially unit testing, it's going to become much easier. But I'm told the system testing is going to become even more important to do with humans, because now we have all these implications. AI becoming more powerful, more dangerous things can happen. So at a system level, you may need more rigorous testing. But yes, Indian IT industry will see this productivity boost. What of that they can retain is an important thing. And given, if you take an India level view, that we are going to have 100 million new people added to the workforce by 2030 from 2020, how are we going to create jobs for them? I think that's a big question that our country has to answer. And how do we retrain, reskill? How do we prepare and protect our country? These are very big questions that I know multiple people in the government are trying to answer right now. And, we, in our small way, we're all trying to help as well.
Yeah, I know big questions there.
Interesting, if I may, Sujit.
Yeah, Monish.
It's a very interesting point of view. I think if you look at it from hey, what happens to existing jobs? Yes, there could be a threat. If you look at what transformers and large language models are doing to the IT industry, it's a very different vision. So if you look at what they're doing, they're actually bringing use cases that did not exist 5 years ago. They are actually giving us solutions to problems that could not be solved 3 years ago. So what is happening now is the things that you can do with tech, the number of things is just expanding like crazy. Now, if you think about where India is situated, India has one of the largest number, or not one, the largest number of English-speaking population in the world, right? Which means if you can actually take that and you can apply those and you can create those entrepreneurs to solve these problems, we can actually be a country of entrepreneurs. What America was, as the land of opportunity, that is what India is today. If you think about technology like this, yes, you have to reskill, but you don't have to reskill in terms of technology. I think you have to reskill in terms of how do you solve a problem and monetize it? How do you create entrepreneurs? That's the skilling you need today, not the skilling of should I learn Java or C++? That
Monish, while that means the way forward, but the challenge is that our advantage of having a large number of English-speaking people and getting the BPO and outsourcing industry come here has a challenge from bots who might end up speaking better English and be able to give better responses in much lesser time. So that's the huge numbers of people employed in that sector. So that also we need to think of what do we do with them. While if we can make all of them into entrepreneurs, nothing like it. But
it's a very interesting, if you look at the coin, there's actually two ways to look at it, whether it's, speaking English or coding, right? If you have a level, like a 5 on 10 coder, part of his job is now you can see, you look at it at one lens, it's like the glass half full or glass half empty. If he's a 5 on 10 coder, you might say, okay, part of his job now, ChatGPT can write, right? He can code on behalf and write the same quality as a 5 on 10 level coder. But that also means that a 0 on 10 coder or a 1 on 10 coder can now write using a ChatGPT by prompting it correctly, write 5 on 10 level code or write 7 on 10 level code. So it's introducing a whole new set of people into the job market, but it's also taking existing people and shaking them out of their, or, removing them from the role. Similarly for the language piece, right? A whole host of India that speaks local languages, Like I have someone in my office who knew like very broken English, but now writes phenomenal mails for me. So suddenly he's gone into this new role because he can now write email, because he could read English, but he couldn't write English well. So now he can. And there's another person who could write great English, but now, his role is a little confused because, ChatGPT can do the same quality. So while it's creating opportunity, it's also removing opportunities, just the perspective you look at it. So there'll be a whole host of India that will get opportunities. There'll be a whole host of India who will get disrupted. And we need to see which end everything ends up in.
And that's what disruptions do. I think I'm talking about the overall opportunity. What will happen 10 years down the line? What are the opportunities we should focus on 10 years down the line? Not what happens in the next year when, 20,000 people lose a job and 50,000 people get different jobs. It is a problem, of course. I'm not saying, that we should ignore that. I think, it's also very interesting to see the bigger picture here in terms of what disruptions bring to the table. Absolutely.
I mean, by the way, if you look at the bell curve of distribution, I think there are some counterintuitive findings. If you look at the bell curve of talent, they say that the middle can go to the right, meaning their average can become much better. The top people can get really, really good. Right. But the left of the bell curve, right, left part of the bell curve actually may not actually benefit, because their ability to now mix and match and stitch everything together, which is what the skill we are looking for, requires a lot of fluid intelligence. So I think there are some intuitive, but there are some counterintuitive findings as well in terms of what is going to happen in this new world as we go there. And this disruption is real, and we have to prepare our country for the upcoming disruption.
Yeah, that's a huge discussion that's happening globally as well. Monish and Abhinav, I just want to know, of course, your introductions seem to suggest many of your clients are global, but if you had Indian clients and you needed to translate, let's say, Monish's case, contracts into other Indian languages and understand those things, and Abhinav in your conversational bots and all of that. Now, would you create those local language LLMs yourself, or would you wait for Abhishek's Bhashini, etc., to become really good and then use that? What is your plan?
Go ahead, Abhinav.
I'd definitely wait for Abhishek for the large language model side, because I feel once Abhishek sets up that data set, even an OpenAI, even a Google is going to pick up that data set and put it into their LLMs, and phenomenal quality will suddenly emerge. I think right now the approach would be, and ChatGPT 4 also can do a little bit of Hindi. It's not great at it. It's not bad at it either. Like it gets by. It's like a Bombayite level Hindi, if you see it. I think we'd probably look at translation as an approach right now. Try what's there in the LLM space right now as well. See whichever gives us better results. And then keep our fingers crossed that Abhishek's his timelines are short, so that, we replace everything eventually with whatever new comes out.
Yeah. And for us, I think we are not in the business of building large language models, obviously. We want to focus them. We want to make sure that we build domain-specific LLMs. So we'll continue to do that. And we have a lot of Indian customers. So, our India base is very strong. But being a global company gives us a very unique perspective in terms of, how we can actually apply some of these learnings to the context in India. So I can see, a few use cases which are very exciting for us. One is, of course, translation. Just making sure that contracts can be understood in a local language, not just, Hindi and Marathi, but also Spanish and German and Finnish. Making sure that the contracts are well understood, making sure that their intent is clear, making sure that that intent can be realized. I think that's the job that we have tasked ourselves with. And what the work Abhishek is doing, that's why I was very excited. I think the right way to do this is to crowdsource, to make sure that this happens at a national scale, not at, an institutional scale where there are 100 people working on it. You need 1 million people working on this, and 10 million and 20 million people working on this. And I think that's the right approach. And that's going to pay a lot of dividends, not just for us as a company, but also us as a country.
Abhishek, what's your timeline?
We're already on it. In fact, some of the languages are already live on the APIs. So 8 languages are already there. We are going to add another 4 by June, and by December, we should have most of the languages except for a few minor languages. So these APIs, tools for these translations are already available. And as people use it, as the people like Monish and Abhinav and their products start using it more, it will become all the more better. So we have a huge network of academic institutions with whom we are working for. IIT Madras is one of the pioneer institutions which is helping us do that, plus a lot of other startups and companies. So like some of the tools are already there, but we will be there by the end of the year in almost all Indian languages.
What are the biggest use cases you see emerging?
Like, for example, we have tried out in public grievances. Like people file public grievances on the CP Grams portal. So therein, very often people file their grievances in their own language. And the officer who is disposing might not know that language. So he sees the grievance in the language in which he is comfortable with. And the final outcome is also given in the language in which the complainant has given. The UPI, we are working on UPI 123, wherein UPI transactions will become voiceable in Indian language. Suppose you want to pay for your LPG cylinder, you say that 500 rupees isko pay karna, and then with the voice, the chatbot will work and it will do that. We have been trying with eSanjeevani telemedicine solution, because eSanjeevani telemedicine connects people to doctors. Doctors might not know the local language. So the person can speak in his own language, tell about his problem, but the doctor will get to hear it, understand it in the language he understands. And whatever is prescribed gets further translated into the person. Then, as I mentioned, the Jugalbandi, the WhatsApp interface, wherein people will be able to know about government schemes, about problems. मैं आगरा में रहता हूँ, धान की कीमत मंडी में क्या चल रही है, and then with this LLM model it will pick up and say that इतना चल रही है, and what all he can do that. And then the Bhashini app, by the way, is already live on the Play Store and the App Store, which allows you to seamlessly record voice notes and say hear it in another language. So if you're a tourist and if you're going to say Bangalore and there the autowala doesn't want to speak in your language, then you can actually communicate to him in the language of your with which you are comfortable with. So we will be able to let people communicate seamlessly into it. And as my former Secretary IT used to say, Ajay Sani sir, like the test will be that when a Bengali speaking grandmother can talk to a Tamil speaking grandson and tell her a story on phone, and both of them listen to each other seamlessly. So that's the vision he had laid down. So hopefully we'll be there very soon.
Excellent, excellent. That would have been a great note. And I just want to quickly ask, you also mentioned compute infrastructure as an issue. Is there, even for the government, is it?
See, compute infrastructure, we do need to invest a lot. CDAC and all is building Arawat and the Param Siddhi, the supercomputers, which is around 600 GPUs and all. But if you have to really, really compete with the likes of OpenAI and not make our data sets be exposed to non-Indian entities, we will need to build in infrastructure within India, and we'll need to think of a model in which researchers and students and all can access that at a subsidized cost. Because that will really drive innovation. Because if we run 100 algorithms, maybe one of them will succeed. But we need to give an opportunity for many people to run that. Today, if anybody has to run an algo on a large language model, it's pretty expensive. Not everybody will be able to afford that. If we really need to kickstart that, just like we build physical infrastructure as highways, we'll need to set up, invest money and build compute infrastructure which can drive building solutions on these LLMs.
A crowdsourced version of compute for like a Bhashini equivalent for compute.
Something like that. Like we set up in a PPP model, and we just like you pay toll fees on a highway, you pay for pay as you use, depending on what you're using. But have a model in which you make it lower cost for students and researchers, and make your money from those who can afford.
I know we have 5 minutes, 6 minutes past deadline. A wonderful discussion. I'm sure it's also raised a number of questions, some great use cases that are emerging. Thank you all so much for an excellent discussion. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you, hopefully on this platform in the future. I think this is an area that I think the world is going to be discussing for a long time. And Monish also mentioned, Abhishek also mentioned these regulation issues that are coming up. So thank you for a wonderful discussion, Srikanth, Abhishek, Abhinav, Monish. Really nice having you on this platform.
Thank you, and thank you for the passion that makes it.
Thank you all.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.